For this short presentation this evening, there's a lot of thanks that are due to everybody at Floracopeia, because this is actually part of a big presentation that we've been doing that's been going on for several months. And it started with Sarah and I going to the island of Corsica, and that's partly what the story is about. But ever since we went, we have been giving everybody at the office a tremendous amount of work and responsibility, which I know one of the consequences is that it is creating caffeine addiction in order to keep up. And so thank you, everybody at Floracopeia, starting with Thea, Ricardo, Wendy, who is dealing with all the inventory, and Jaidev, who gets to launch all the newsletters, and Nicole, who's there. Mojo, of course, is a big part of all of these media things. Thank you, Mojo, also. All right, so there's so many people now that are involved. It is inevitable I'm going to forget somebody. But now I also have to say thank you to the most important person, to Sarah, because she actually set up the trip, made the whole thing possible for us, did all the logistics, and has continued to do a huge amount of work throughout this entire process. So thank you very much for everything. And that includes putting in a lot of time on a daily basis with all of these product pages. There's so many layers and layers of things that have to go into all of this to make this happen. So this is a big presentation. Of course, we get to enjoy tonight the end result of all of this. We have an hour and a half to 2 hours of just being able to enjoy the oils. But I'm giving you this little background because it's probably hundreds, if not thousands of hours already have gone into us just getting to this particular point where we've got this little collection of about 20 bottles and a couple hours to pass them around and enjoy them. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time to come over. And I will also mention, before we actually start the story, that a lot of these oils are new discoveries for me. My background has been really more on the other side of the world with the Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, my studies of these systems in Asia. And Floracopeia as a company grew out of many trips to India and Nepal and the global network of distillers that we work with, a lot of people in Africa also. And in a certain way, I've been a little behind in sort of the European side of the essential oil training. And these oils represent a lot of oils that are relatively well known in modern aromatherapy that I have less background with than some of the things from the Ayurvedic tradition. And so I'm also very grateful that we have teachers like Kathy Cavill, who are here this evening, who I'm going to just offer an open invitation to please fill me in as we go. Now, many of these oils I am just learning about. I'm just becoming familiar with them. Probably more than half I'm fairly well acquainted with, but there's a number of them that I met for the first time in Corsica. And so for that reason, I will at times be referring to my notes more than usual, because most of the time when I'm presenting about the essential oils, I'm very comfortable. I've said everything about it that I know thousands of times, and in this case, it's a little bit different. So it's a little bit of a group learning experience today. And we'll be passing the oils, and I'm also going to be asking for your feedback as we go to hear what you think about these oils. This is a new group of oils. This is what we're calling the Corsica collection. We've had several media things that have happened around this. There was, of course, a whole series of blogs that we wrote while we were in Corsica, and then there was the announcement, the first webcast that I did when we first came back, and that was more like a travel log slideshow, and that was like, meet the distillers, and this is what Corsica looks like, and this is where we went in the south of France, and this is where we went in Sardinia, and just an overview of the whole trip to give everybody a background of where we went. And then last week we had a brief introductory phone call. The class today is the third event in this series, and those of you who are watching the website have seen that we have actually launched 3 groups. The first one was the cistus oil that came out a couple weeks ago. The second group of oils came out this last weekend, and then the next group, the third group, is actually coming out in a couple days, which will be the citrus oils. And so this class is to actually review the entire group, and as I have been promising this entire time, this class is really about the therapeutic orientation. Everybody has met the distillers, you've heard the story of the grand tour, and now we've rolled out the first groups of oils, and so now it's time to look at the actual therapeutics of the oils in some detail. Now, some of these we can cover rather quickly as an entire group, and we don't have to spend a lot of time with a lot of the therapeutic information for some of them, because we could spend 2 hours on one oil, really. So we're going to just touch on the most important therapeutic points, and we would like to conclude with what I consider to be one of the greatest discoveries during this trip, which I've been making a lot of noise about this whole time, which is that I think we have found the world's best quality helichrysum oil. And that's a story. I mean, that was kind of the quest that we told the story about, the search for immortel, okay, the quest for immortel, which is the other name for the helichrysum oil. And we not only found what I think is one of the best helichrysum oil in the world, but we also found what I consider to be the best lavender oil in the world, and the best cistus oil, and the best of this and the best of that. And so this collection is really about that. But that oil in particular we'll spend more time on at the end, because it's also one of the most important therapeutic oils of all the ones that we have. I would say we have a few real genuine aromatic treasures here. We have a whole lot of oils that are really important for general aromatherapy purposes. And then we have a few that are really, really number one oils for the home pharmacy. So that's kind of how I broke it down. Corsica is in the Mediterranean. It is an 8-hour ferry ride from Toulon, France, okay, or a 5-hour ferry ride from Nice, depending on which way you are going and the speed of the boat. So from the south of France, our journey, I'll just give you a quick overview. We flew into Paris, which is just sort of a blur of jet lag and traffic in my memory, and we rented a car with a GPS, which saved our life, and we drove through the tangled streets of Paris into the tangled streets of the little villages in the south of France. We went to Provence first, to the area south of France where the lavender is cultivated. We have a couple of lavender oils from that region for tonight. And then we took the ferry to Corsica. And Corsica is actually part of France, and Corsica is very, very unique. That's where all the pictures that you'll see are from. It's very unique because the climate there is extraordinary for the production of really high quality essential oils in the aromatic plants, and the production of lots and lots of other things that are really nice. The air is incredibly clean, the water is very clean, the sunlight's very fresh and intense, and it goes from a whole range of ecosystems, from the ocean all the way to high mountains in very short distance. It's very vital. It's a heaven realm of aromatic plants is how I have described it. And so it's a famous area for aromatherapy. There are 8 distillers actually that are there. We met all of them. We met 3 distillers on the mainland of France. This has all been part of the original story that I told with the first webcast. We don't need to go into that a lot, but Corsica is actually not only the source of incredible essential oils because the plants are so vital, but all the food there is really incredible also. And the wine is quite incredible, and the honey, and the cheeses, and the charcuterie. And so all of the cured meats, everything there is, it kind of reflects this concentrated prana of the island. It's very wonderful. So we brought back these particular oils, and let me give you an introduction now. This oil is actually not from Corsica, but we launched it as part of the Corsica collection because we found it on the island of Corsica, and that's what this first picture is. We are smelling rock rose. This is Cistus laudinifera. And this is a very wonderful oil to start with because it will make everyone feel nicely euphoric, and that always helps a lecture. This is one of Sarah's favorite oils now. I have had some exposure to cistus before. Many years ago, I wrote about this little experience on the recent blog post. And I actually purchased some, I think it must be about 10 years ago. And I had a little experience using it in perfumery. And then I put it away. I wrapped it up in a plastic bag and I put that inside a drawer and I forgot about it. I left it there. And then many years later, I opened the drawer and there was the bag and I took it out and it was just as strong as ever. Maybe even stronger. So let's learn the first thing about cistus. In perfumery, this would be called a long-lasting tenacious base note. Can you tell? The intensity creeps up on you a little bit. May I suggest that this is a very fine single note perfume to just apply. Sarah's favorite perfume, which I think we should launch actually relatively soon, is a combination of cistus and Palo Santo oil. Very nice combination. Now, there are several, do you like it? It's somewhat euphoric, isn't it? Now, there are two basic things that I understand about this oil that I have actually digested and metabolized in my own awareness about this particular oil. One is that it seems to have really good healing effects for the skin. And the other is that it has characteristics that make me think of placing this in the group of oils that we like to call the sacred scents. And sacred scents are those that have a strong effect on consciousness, that are relaxing and antidepressant, uplifting, anti-anxiety, calmative, euphoric. Can any of you get a sense that if you were to sit here for several minutes breathing this deeply that you might start to feel euphoric? Is there anybody who already is feeling euphoric? Okay, nice. So this euphoric quality of certain oils is known throughout history within this context that I like to say now characterizes sacred scents. And so we have frankincense, and we have Palo Santo, and we have sandalwood, and we have agarwood. And we have also some flowers. For example, rose has this history of also being considered very sacred and used in a spiritual context, not just perfume context, but actually to enhance meditative states and relaxation and so forth. So the first thing that we can say about cistus is that it's a meditative type of perfume with this kind of euphoric, uplifting kind of effect. So how would you describe the fragrance? Anybody? Would you like to throw out some perfumer's language here? And let me go ahead and move this slide forward. Here, this is the plant itself. Now, one of the things that's interesting is that this plant, when I first met it, actually in this picture here, this other gentleman is the distiller of the helichrysum that you'll meet at the end here. And so this was the first time I met the plant. Literally, he was showing this to me. And this grows in Corsica, and they are now, on this farm, they are now cultivating this, and they will be distilling it also. And it's also interesting because this rock rose has many different cousins botanically. This is a Cistus laudinifera, but there are actually about 6 or 7 or 8 other species that grow in the Mediterranean. And I just learned actually a few days ago that we have one that grows around here also. That there's a rock rose that Sarah discovered up in the high country that's up there, and so we have a local variety of it. But this plant, when I was being introduced to it, this gentleman here, Jean-Michel, said, "Here, feel the plant." And so he had me actually grab the plant itself, and it's covered with sticky resin. And so that's one of the things that we are perceiving here is that it's a very thick, heavy kind of oil. Do some of you know yerba santa?
We just had some fresh we brought in today.
It has the same kind of oleoresin gumminess to it, for those of you who are familiar with the herb itself. But it has this fragrance. When you actually squeeze a plant, it will stick to your hands. And traditionally, it was harvested by the goats. That's one of those historical stories. You know, when you start researching these oils, you come across all of these anecdotes about the history of the oil. And this is one of the ways that they discovered that the oil is actually really good for the skin. Because what they would do is they would send the goats through these plants, and the resin would get all over their hair, and then they would pull that out. Okay, they would pull the resin out, and that type of resinous harvest of cistus is actually considered by some perfumers to be extremely exceptional, because not only do you get this wonderful cistus note, you also get the what are the proper terms? Animalic, goaty kind of perfume that goes with it. And so now you can also imagine that this probably has some aphrodisiac effects as well. So what the shepherds noticed and what the harvesters noticed when they were actually cleaning the oil out of the hair from the goats is that if they had wounds, cuts, scrapes, infections on their hands, that they would heal very quickly. So those are the two starting points that we have therapeutically for this oil, is that we can use it in a diffuser in very small amounts. The oil diffuser, the water ionizing nebulizer that we have works very nicely, because you can put any oil of any consistency on the water and it will turn it into a nice mist that is not overpowering. And this can work very nicely for enhancing a meditative kind of mood. So you might want to think about this first as a kind of support for a contemplative mood in the house. We're talking about cistus, which is also known as rock rose, and this one is from Spain. we met this oil on the island of Corsica. All the distillers carry a number of other oils other than the ones that they're distilling specifically. But as you can see here, Jean-Michel is actually cultivating this on his land, and they are planning to distill it next year. So this is a close-up. All of these pictures, by the way, were taken by Sarah, who has become a master photographer, an expert of using the macro lens. And so here you can see the flower itself, and it's quite gorgeous. All right. So let me give you just a few pointers here, if you would like a few simple recipes. I suggest, other people suggest also, that you might like it in a sacred scent kind of blend with frankincense and with sandalwood. And it goes nicely with rose also. Can you imagine that? Can you use your olfactory imagination? I think we would call that olfactualization, right? That we can visualize this mixed with Palo Santo, as Sarah has created. That is in line with this same basic idea that this oil would have a nice supportive effect for meditation. So you can put a drop directly on the palms also. It might be a little intense to put more than one drop. And it can also be added in a very small dilute amount to any kind of unscented creams or gels or anything like that. Massage oils, of course, this would be a very nice one to add to massage oils because it's also really good to the skin. And so therefore, we would automatically think what oil? When we think of a major oil to help with the skin, you know the story of how it was discovered to have therapeutic effects for cuts and scratches. You want to think of number one, helichrysum. Helichrysum. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time with helichrysum at the end of the class, but helichrysum is the number one oil for the skin. Number one trauma, number one oil for resolving bruises, for speeding up the healing of cuts and scratches and removing scar tissue, pain and inflammation. This is also anti-inflammatory. There's also a lot of research that I came across. We don't need to get into all of this, but this has been looked at from the scientific standpoint, and they find that this oil actually has a lot of antimicrobial powers, a lot of anti-inflammatory powers, a lot of anti-this and anti-that, which we're not technically supposed to say about these essential oils, but it's true. They find that all these essential oils have incredible medicinal value. So this one, I'll just go through quickly some of the medical things that I found about this. It's antiviral, and so you might want to consider this, putting it in a salve. It's considered actually fairly strong as an antiviral. It's also considered to be fairly strong as an immune stimulant. And this is also something we find with the sacred scents, frankincense and sandalwood, Palo Santo, is that they have a wide range of antimicrobial and immune-enhancing benefits. This is very much like helichrysum in what we call a cicatrint effect, which means, any of you know, that it basically closes. It helps to close open wounds. Okay, so it basically it helps with wound healing, and it also has been found to have a nice effect on balancing the nervous system, and this is also characteristic of a lot of the sacred senses. We find that for those people who are really stressed, that it has a relaxing effect. For those people who are really tired, it has a tonifying, kind of strengthening effect. So it has a regulatory effect, you might say, on the autonomic nervous system. Now, one of the things I think you are noticing by now is this has a very slow dry out rate. In other words, you can use this as a car freshener for the next 5 years, probably. Now, that's also addressing your question, and the question was, is this safe for children as an immune stimulant? Now, my knowledge of this use specifically for children at this point is non-existent. My general impression of this oil, based on the knowledge that I've just given you about its qualities on the mind, its qualities as a sacred scent, its historical use, its general safety used on the skin, its wide range of applications for skin conditions, for aging skin, for wrinkles, all these, for wound healing in general, these kind of things. I would say that my impression is that this oil is actually mild, but that its odor intensity is very, very strong. Therefore, it reminds me in a certain way of other oils like ylang ylang. And ylang ylang is actually very mild in some ways. It's not going to burn the skin. It's not going to actually cause any kind of serious problems, except for the fact that its aroma is so overwhelming. So therefore, I would say that most likely, based on my information, my knowledge at this point, of its safety for external application, its benefit for external application, and its benefit for the mind and the moods, its known antimicrobial benefits and immune-enhancing benefits, that if it's used diluted so that the aroma itself is not overpowering, it's probably quite safe. Before we conclude with this oil, would you like to practice connecting the verbal centers of the brain to the olfactory centers? Meaning, can you describe it? For those who are listening in on the webcast, what words would you use to invoke the fragrance that we are all now enjoying? It is a deep bass note, and as I pointed out in my first story, it's also very tenacious. It will last a long time. What else?
It smells very cinnamony.
Cinnamony. It does have a kind of spicy presence. In that sense, it's similar to the Yerba Santa oleo resin gumminess in that regard. But spiciness is not really how it's described primarily.
It smells mischievous.
Mischievous, as in potential euphoric aphrodisiac benefits. Mischievous, she says. Musky, okay, good. Musky, animalic. Musky, animalic, herbaceous. Can you get the herbaceous part? And it's very, very sweet. It's very sweet with a kind of honey-like note. And to conclude the story around this is also one of the species of plant, not this Latinifera rock rose, but other botanical cousins. This rock rose grows all over the island of Corsica. It actually grows, this one itself, this species of Latinifera is very aggressive in Spain. It has taken over huge areas, and it really likes that hot, dry climate. It is not a sensitive plant at all. It's very aggressive. And on the island of Corsica, this is one of the primary fragrances that you perceive. The island is aromatic everywhere you go, especially at the time when we went, when it was just starting to heat up and the flowers were just starting to come out. The island is intensely perfumed. And the two primary species that are making the island perfumed are the various species of rock rose, which grow all over, and the helichrysum, which is intensely sweet. And that ecosystem is called the marquis, and the marquis is also where we get the lovely honey from. And so the marquis honey is also this kind of aroma. Now, we will do a group of oils next. These will go a little faster. And one of the reasons that this will go a little faster is because we can generalize a lot of things about these 4 oils. These are the oils that we released last week, and these are very similar therapeutically, but they're all very different in terms of their aroma. This first one is the Corsican pine, and it's actually a Pinus nigra, black pine, but it's commonly called the Corsican pine. And the second one after that is cypress, and that comes from the south of France. The third one is the dwarf juniper. It is the Juniperus communis, which is the common juniper, but it's a variety called nana, or nana, which is a miniature version of it that grows in the high altitudes in the mountains. And then the fourth one is laurel. And so these were grouped together last week in what we call the aromatic tree oils. So let's just go ahead and I'll pass around the Corsican pine first. The pine oils of all types are basically in the group of oils that we like to refer to as the respiratory oils. And so automatically the respiratory oils, as we have talked about many, many times in all kinds of retreats and classes, the respiratory oils are the most important group of oils for bringing into the home for the home pharmacy, and the most important group of oils to have in public places for public health. Basically, when we bring in these oils into the home, what we are doing is we're bringing the immune system of the forest into the home, because these trees produce these oils as part of their external immune system in their needles. And that includes all the different pines and the cypress and the junipers and all the conifers and all the eucalyptus also we can include in this group. So let's go ahead and pass these around. And you'll notice that this one, the reason that this Corsican pine is really unique is because it's really sweet. You can see here that the trees on the island are really quite extraordinary. That's my favorite, actually. And we traveled through this mountainous region here. We actually saw views like this. Do you like this one?
Yes.
Okay, now this is quite different from most pine oils, because most pine oils have more of an astringent kind of medicinal note to them, or a kind of slightly unpleasant resinous or terpenic note, a turpentine kind of note can be very predominant in a lot of pine oils. My assessment of this oil, I like this better than typical pine oils because of its aroma. Because it's sweeter, it's lighter, it's not so terpenic in nature. And so I would say this will easily go into a lot of the respiratory oil types, the respiratory group types of blends. And so the respiratory oils are very easy to understand because they're your first choice for any type of respiratory condition. And they're very easy to use because they are not overwhelming in terms of their odor like the cistus. We don't have to worry about giving ourselves a headache from breathing too much of it. They dissipate very easily. They're light in nature. They have low dermotoxic potential, which means that we don't have to worry about burning ourselves if we apply some to the chest while we're in the shower. Basically, these respiratory oils are very easy for a wide range of applications. Now, the two most basic ways that we would like to use these oils in general is direct palm inhalation. It's very, very easy to just put a few drops of this oil in the palms and breathe it. And in the diffuser. This is your number one choice in the diffuser for basically atmospheric purification. Now, all of the respiratory oils, including this pine and the dwarf juniper and the cypress, they all have atmospheric purifying effects at the microbial level. So what that means is that if you have them going in the diffuser, they will reduce airborne microbial pathogens. And this is very important to understand for reducing contagion of colds and flus, basically. So where would we like to use this black pine oil from Corsica? Everywhere. Everywhere in public places. So this would be one of your first choices to carry while you're traveling. This is a common question that comes up. What should I take when I go on the plane? Well, I don't advise that you attract any aromatic attention to yourself on the airplane or before you get on the airplane. I've heard some curious things that have happened to people when they're doing aromatherapy on airplanes. But this would be a good thing to consider. You might like to have a couple, one solution to this problem is to have a little baggie with some cotton balls inside that are saturated, and then you can just open the baggie and sniff it. And if you're on a long plane flight, having that kind of immune enhancement, mucous membrane activation can be very helpful. And these oils are not only antimicrobial, they are generally immune enhancing as well. So there's all kinds of ways of using them. Sarah and I, when we travel and we find ourselves in a less than optimal environment in a hotel room, we just open a bottle and just sprinkle it all around, just like that. Bless the room. And it will have an immediate effect on purifying the atmosphere. So there's lots of ways to use this. Of course, a few drops on a pot of hot water, cover your head with a towel and breathe the steam. This is really nice for a wide range of upper respiratory things. We're talking about sinus headaches, congestion, we're talking about allergies, we're talking about colds and flus, we're talking about congestion. The entire mucous membrane of the respiratory system is benefited with these oils, and this pine oil is right there at the top. Of course, all the respiratory oils blend very nicely with each other, and so you don't have to worry about the different recipes. We have on the product pages recipes and recipes and recipes, but it's a very simple thing to use the respiratory oils combined with other respiratory oils, and wide range of therapeutic benefits. Now, it's not just the respiratory system that benefits from these so-called respiratory oils from the trees. All of these, like the juniper and the pine and the eucalyptus and all these kind of things, they also, because they have this clearing effect on the sinuses, they will also have direct benefit for what else would you think? Anytime you increase the intake of wonderful prana, your consciousness. And so therefore these oils also have a long history of use for basically clearing the mind. And so therefore there is a strong link between the chronic well-being or chronic problem, the well-being or lack of well-being of the sinuses and your general state of mind. Does anybody notice that? Have any of you ever gone through like chronic sinus congestion and you wake up and the term I like to use is you have mental torpor. The mind is dull. And so therefore, if you use direct palm inhalation, breathe this in, it's not only very good for protecting the mucous membranes of the respiratory system and resolving congestion, reducing inflammation in those membranes, but it is also a kind of freshening effect for the prana of the brain. And so the way that I like to think about the respiratory oils is that we're distilling the immune system of the outside of the trees that are in the forest, and we're bringing that in to the homes, and we're breathing it in directly. And so that's a kind of prana. That's a way that I understand the word prana, life force energy that's linked to the breath, because these oils will actually open the breathing passageways very nicely. They are decongestant, they are expectorant, they're anti-inflammatory, and so these are very, very good for all of those conditions of the lungs. The pine oil is sweeter than the typical pine. Let me go ahead and pass around the other one that you would like to know about. Now, this one, Pinus sylvestris. Now, we have had Pinus sylvestris in our stock actually for quite a while. And what we are doing is we are replacing it with a new version of it that's coming from a different distiller, which I think is actually better than what we've had and a better price than what we've had. So that was also one of the reasons that we went, was to try to find replacement oils to improve the line that we currently have. And so this one is not the Corsican pine. This one actually comes from the south of France. And this one is now in our line as the Pinus sylvestris, and it is also organic. And you'll notice this is more like a typical pine, and you'll notice what a difference there is. This will also make it very easy to understand one of the other primary benefits of the pine oils, or I should say one of their primary overall uses, and that is for cleansing. Because here, with this particular pine, it's not as sweet, wouldn't you agree? So this one is actually rather terpenic and resinous and a little bit astringent and medicinal, and it would be fairly easy now to understand why pine oil is so widely used in cleansing agents. And this type of pine is not as expensive as the Corsican pine. The oils from Corsica in general tend to be more costly than the ones from the mainland. This one is nice. This is a nice pine oil, but this is more typical. And now you can actually compare the difference. Can you tell that the plants on the island of Corsica have a different type of vitality? Now we'll really start to notice this as we go along. Okay, so this has all the same properties as the Corsican pine, but it's much less sweet. Now we come to cypress. And cypress is an oil that we have been receiving many requests for a long time, and so we're happy to have it. And because it is one of these tree oils, we can automatically understand that it has a lot of the same therapeutic benefits for the respiratory system. So therefore we see that it's very beneficial for a wide range of respiratory conditions. It can be used in the diffuser, it can be used for direct palm inhalation. We'll go ahead and get this one going. Now this one, however, is very different than both of the previous pine oils. And the aroma of this is going to remind you not so much of an oil from green needles and leaflets, but it's going to remind you more of cedarwood oil. It's very much like cedarwood oil in its aroma. Now this is actually from the leaflets. It is not from the wood. We can get the oil from the wood, but I liked this one. But it still has a very dry, astringent, woody kind of fragrance that is very reminiscent of cedarwood. Would you not agree? Mm-hmm. And so therefore, we can see that there's a similarity with cedarwood oil because cedarwood is also very good for the respiratory system. Now, my general impression, and this is open to interpretation, many other aromatherapists may have a different impression of this, but maybe I'll get 3 out of 3 here. My general impression of the lighter respiratory oils like the Corsican pine, like the sweeter eucalypti, like the sweeter conifers, like the silver fir, things like that, that they really work more on the upper respiratory and the sinuses very, very well. And the cedar oil and an oil like this actually goes a little deeper. And my training has, I have come across a lot of references for cedarwood oil, for example, to be used as a chest rub and salves and ointments on the chest to help with deeper expectoration. I'm sure it's still good for the sinuses, but my sense is that it's a deeper note aromatically and that it actually works a little bit deeper in the lungs themselves. I would not consider cedar wood oil like a primary sinus oil, okay? Now, like I said, there's a lot of differences of interpretation of this. For example, there's some similarities here. I'm just going to go ahead and draw some other similarities to help us understand other common oils, how they might be related. For example, cedarwood oil is actually renowned as one of the best treatments to just take a drop or two and just massage it in the scalp for dandruff. It cleanses the skin, so it gets rid of dandruff quite effectively. It's a astringent antiseptic for the skin, and so is this cypress oil. So cypress oil is also reputed. It is known in aromatherapy as being very beneficial for the skin, especially oily skin, and especially for having a cleansing effect on the skin. So we find cypress is used a lot in skin formulas. And when you think of skin formulas, what else might you want to think of? Say for oily skin, what would you maybe like to mix this with? Chamomiles, geraniums, things like that, and then you want to put it in a carrier oil. So this is a relatively safe oil. It's not considered to have any real dermotoxic potential, and therefore it also fits very nicely in the respiratory category. All those oils are quite safe for the skin. How would you describe the fragrance here? It's quite woody, isn't it? Dry, a little bit smoky, dry, woody. It's not fresh and sweet and green like the previous one. All right. Any questions or comments about this? Because we do need. I mean, I could just keep on going and give you all these recipes and all that, but is that sufficient for a general overview? Do you have a general sense of how you would like to use it? In the diffuser for the lungs, blended with other essential oils that are very good for the skin, antiseptic, somewhat astringent, very good for detoxification and cleansing of oily skin in particular. That would be my summation. Go ahead.
Well, on an energetic level, historically, cypress has been associated with death and passing and that type of thing. So if somebody has a lung condition and they're also in deep sadness or mourning or something like that, which is usually in Chinese medicine, as you know, associated with lungs and the breath and heaving, and it seems to have a special resonance to be able to help that.
Yes, thank you. The association then is mythologically and historically, symbolically, mythologically, this is something that you find also commonly associated with this particular species, is that it's a little bit associated with death, grieving, sadness, the underworld, things like that. And so therefore, as Kathy was pointing out, that there is a link in Chinese medicine with grief and sadness as well. And so that's just another picture of the cypress tree there. And now here we come to the dwarf juniper. I really like this particular species a lot. Now, we have had for many years a juniper oil that has been distilled for us in Crestone, Colorado. This one is so good, I want to put a lot on the perfume strips. I want to saturate these perfume strips. This is no objections. This is another example, another very obvious example at the olfactory level of the kind of vitality that the plants have. Just like the Pinus sylvestris from the south of France is very astringent and dry compared to the sweetness of the Corsican pine, the juniper that we have that comes from Colorado, from from the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. That is the Juniperus scopulorum, or the Rocky Mountain juniper. And that is very dry and medicinal compared to this. Now that's not all it is. It also is very green and herbaceous and so forth. But this one, this dwarf juniper, actually is an intriguing mixture of spicy notes, fruity notes, green herbaceous notes. Do you notice? Can you all respond a little louder for the microphone here? Okay, good. It's got a lot going on. It's very intriguing from the olfactory standpoint. I like it a lot. It's, the juniper oils can be a little one-dimensional sometimes. Certainly compared to this, it's very, this one's very rich. It's almost like there is almost a fruit note. Almost a little banana or pear or something that pops out at first. But there's a lot more going on because there's also a lot of earthiness and spiciness in there as well. All right. Now, juniper fits with our general classification of being a respiratory oil because it's also a conifer, actually. It produces little little cones, actually. And so it has a long history of use in ethnobotanical medicine for the atmosphere. And juniper, I would say, is one of the more universal of the sacred sense as well. I would say that with juniper, we actually see a little bit of a crossover between the functions of the respiratory oils into the functions of ceremony. And I have seen this many, many times in the Tibetan Buddhist community especially. It's the greenery of the juniper is actually just burned in the incense burner directly during ceremonies. They just bring in the dry branches and just plop them down. They just go up in smoke, and that's it. That's the incense. So whenever we see any type of plant that is used in ceremonial purposes for producing smoke, we can always assume two basic things. One, it has significant antimicrobial effects, and two, it has significant effects on consciousness. And so that is characteristic of the sacred sense, and since juniper has such a long history universally of being used in ceremony, we can also find that these two aspects of this oil are also there. So juniper also has a wide range of antimicrobial atmospheric purifying effects, meaning that it's going to actually neutralize and kill the pathogens in the atmosphere. At the same time, it's going to have a very beneficial effect on our respiratory system, specifically mucous membranes. We see the same kind of general application, decongestant, expectorant, and so forth, with all the other respiratory oils. But we also see that it's not just this sort of enhancement of clarity of mind like you would get if you did a direct palm inhalation of the Corsican pine. It's not just that there's actually this application in ritual and ceremony for supporting spiritual awareness and consciousness. Here's another picture of this dwarf juniper, and this is a really nice way to understand the concept of ecophysiology, that it's actually the energy and the elements of the environment that go into the final result that we distill from the plant. So therefore, what we just smelled with that dwarf juniper is actually the high altitude, the fresh air, the clean water, the rugged soil. Now, very briefly, just to wrap up juniper therapeutically, juniper is generally considered to be a detoxifying oil. Now, I classified it as a respiratory oil. That's true. It can be used easily in the diffuser, direct palm inhalation for the respiratory conditions, just like eucalyptus and the pine oils. However, juniper also has, historically as an herb, and the berries have a strong association with the kidneys and with the lymphatic system. Now here we always have to make a distinction, because when you read a lot of information about essential oils that also have a counterpart as an herb, they frequently get confused. And we have to be careful to understand that just because the juniper berries may have a very beneficial effect on some limited cases of kidney problems when taken as a tea, that does not mean that you can take the juniper oil internally for your kidneys. Okay. Now, that's a completely different subject of how the oil is used medically, and we're not going to get into that. But let's just say the way that you can apply this is to think about juniper in massage as having a very nice lymphatic decongesting kind of effect. And there is an oil that I'm going to introduce a little bit later that is a new oil that I know practically nothing about, except that it combines very well for decongesting the lymph system in massage, and that is samphire. Okay, samphire, samphire. It's a beautiful sounding name. So I will refer back to this one, and I'll say that this is a very nice therapeutic combination that I actually learned from the distillers there, who said that these two oils work together very well in massage for lymphatic decongestion. And along with that, these two oils can also be associated very nicely for massage for benefiting cellulite. And also in general as a refreshing, sort of energizing massage for kapha people. All right, for people who have excess fluid, for people who are overweight, and so forth. So that's the way that we can think about juniper at the internal medical level. Okay, but we're not taking it internally. We're not confusing it with its internal use as an herb. But we're thinking about the oil specifically for compress, for massage, for lymphatic drainage types of purposes, and so forth. Here's another oil that is very famous in aromatherapy that is somewhat new for me, and that is laurel. And this is a beautiful picture of the flower, and this is a beautiful example of the oil. This is the oil that is coming from the distiller. You know, every distiller on Corsica had many oils that were all the same. But what we noticed was that depending on where they were on the island, that the oils were very different. And so what that meant was that some oils were really better of some species on the north side, and those oils of the same species were not so good on the south side, and vice versa. And so we brought back hundreds and hundreds of these bottles, and we had a party at the house. We had the whole Floracopeia staff over. And I thought, well, you know, maybe 2 hours will be enough. We got through maybe a tenth of the oils, because what we were trying to do was to compare, because we had 5 or 6 samples of each species from each distiller from different parts of the island, and we were trying to figure out which one would we like to get. And that took a long time and a lot of discussion to sort out. And what we ended up doing was picking the best oils from each location geographically represented by these different distillers. So this one is actually coming from the north side of the island. And this is the laurel leaves. And this is Laurus nobilis. And I think this will be very easy to describe as being sweet and having distinctive notes of clove and cinnamon. Would you agree? Now, if somebody told you that this has distinctive notes of clove and cinnamon, what would you immediately think in terms of dermotoxic potential? I would say, yes, be careful. However, it's not really known as a dermotoxic oil like clove and cinnamon. It's considered to be relatively non-toxic and non-irritant, but be a little more careful with direct application on the skin. Do you like it? It's nice, isn't it? Yeah, it does have a little menthol note to it that comes out a little bit later. So this one is also really well known in aromatherapy as stimulating to the lymphatic circulation, drainage, and cleansing also. And also, this one has a reputation at the psychological level of boosting your self-confidence and self-esteem and self-expression. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? It's like a tonic herb, actually. It's like a fire element herb. And the fire element herbs are going to increase your pitta, which means it's going to make you feel more courageous and overheated, all right? And you're going to start to express yourself more, okay? So, can you notice that? This is not, I would not classify this as a sedating oil, would you? This is an energy, this oil has an energy that's very active, very dynamic, very heating, very expressive. So therefore, it's also very good for the musculoskeletal system. And I came across a lot of references for it being used in salves and liniments and mixtures with birch oil, wintergreen oil, and so forth. So you can apply it topically in the compress on the sore muscles. You can use it for direct inhalation. You can use it in the diffuser. Obviously, it would be a very nice oil to have during the winter season, perhaps. All right, now we go to the citrus group. They're very similar therapeutically. They're very similar fragrance-wise as well. There's more similarity with the citrus oils than there are with that last group of the tree oils. They're a lot closer. There are 4 oils that I'm going to introduce. One is orange, the other is clementine, the other is grapefruit, and there is also one called petitgrain. And it is very specifically the petitgrain or the petitgrain of clementine. Now, what makes these oils very interesting and unique, 2 things. One, the environment, again, is superior. It produces these fruits. This is the gentleman that we met who has a very old orchard there. This orchard has been there in his family for generations and generations. He took us on a walk around his orchard, and he said, "Oh, look over on this side. Look at how these terraces were made." He says, "You can't get any kind of machinery on these terraces. That's because they were made in the 1800s. My great-great-great-great-grandfather built them." So you see a lot of that on Corsica, that these farms have been in families for a very long time. And so these are old citrus trees. And he is producing these 3 oils in a very interesting way. And this is where I met the term zest. Orange zest, clementine zest, grapefruit zest, mandarin zest. Well, we decided to keep that name zest because it describes the oil. I mean, in a certain way, that is the quality that it has. But it also is apparently a type of distillation process that they use. Now, the oils that we have had so far at Floracopeia are basically cold pressed, and they have been coming mostly from South Africa. These are coming from Corsica, which has this unique environment, so the fruit itself is just unbelievably sweet and very rich in these citrus notes. But the way that they get the oil is different. And so what they do, these first 3 oils, the orange and the clementine and the grapefruit zest, these oils are first chopped up. The fruits are first chopped up. They take the entire whole fruit and they chop the entire thing. They mix it in this big vat with all the juices and all the peel, and then they centrifuge that. And then they take that liquid, which is very rich in essential oils, and then they distill that. Okay, so it's a whole fruit, centrifuged, steam distilled extract. How's that? Yes, very juicy. And it preserves a lot of the fragrances that may or may not come from the cold pressing. I don't know. Personally, I think that these oils are, I would say, dramatically more rich in aroma than just cold press. But you can tell me what you think. It's quite rich, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, therapeutically, the citrus oils do have a lot of benefits. I have never personally thought of the citrus oils as highly medicinal in general. Mostly, they're used actually in flavoring. That's where the majority of them are used in the industry, and it's rather easy to use citrus oils in cooking and add a drop to cold sparkling mineral water in the summer heat. That kind of thing is quite easy. The main things that we think about with the citrus oils, first of all, an aroma like this orange zest is definitely going to uplift our mood. And so in the diffuser, all the citrus oils can be considered anti-anxiety and antidepressant mood enhancers. The way that I like to classify the citruses are basically happy oils. They're oils that are really good for general background fragrancing everywhere for everybody. Cistus oil may be a little exotic for some people to have, this kind of godian, malic, herbaceous, green, intense kind of fragrance in the background to help with your contemplative practice. But nobody will object to orange zest in the background. And so it's very nice for the moods, all the citruses. The citruses, however, in the diffuser also add a significant antimicrobial component when you mix them with the respiratory oils. So they're very nice for basic purification of the atmosphere as well. Now the one thing that we also want to remember about the citruses, they have a paradoxical nature. On the one hand, when they are blended in low dilution, they can actually be very healing for the skin. They can enhance microcirculation, they can help to prevent aging of the skin, they can rejuvenate the skin, they can be very beneficial for the skin. But the paradox is that they're also potentially very dangerous for the skin because they have coumarins, which means that they will enhance absorption of ultraviolet light, which in plain English means they're phototoxic. So you can use the orange oil, the citrus oils, in recipes with a little further education. If you look on the product pages, you'll see that there are some nice recipes of how you can actually mix the citrus oils that are safe, that are dilute for application to the skin. But the main thing you want to think about is don't apply the citrus oils directly to the skin. And even if you have them diluted, they're commonly used in massage oil because they're so nice. But you may want to avoid going out in the sun afterwards for a period of time. So typically, the citrus oils, we say, give it a little time until you go out and get exposure. So get a massage in the late afternoon, and then it'll wear off overnight. Now here, this is a good one, huh? Now here we're going to go on a little diversion here, and this one is Petitgrain. This one is a totally different one. We're moving away from the zest oils. Normally, Petitgrain oils, the ones I have met so far, a lot of the ones I have met so far, they're distilled from the leaves and the twigs. And this makes a nice oil. It's okay. But traditionally, those oils also used to include the tiny fruits and the flowers. But the tiny fruits and the flowers don't give a lot of oil. That's why neroli, the blossoms themselves, that's why the neroli oil is so expensive, because you need 1,000 pounds of hand-picked flowers. You know that 1 pound of flowers it's a lot of flowers, 1 pound, because they're not very heavy. So that's a lot of flowers, 1,000 pounds of hand-picked blossoms to get 1 liter of oil. So very low yield, and that's why none of the distillers in Corsica do it, because they're still in Europe, they're still basically in the economic constraints of producing things agriculturally in Europe, which is just as hard economically as producing things here in the United States. And that's why the neroli is still coming from North Africa, where the economics are totally different, where labor and production costs are much, much lower. So the neroli oil is very, very low yield. And Petitgrain oil, if it's only the leaves and the twigs, it's not really very high quality. It's okay, but this one is somewhere in between, because this also has the flowers in it. And this is clementine. Clementine is actually a variety of mandarin orange, very, very close. And so this is, in my opinion, a really, truly beautiful citrus oil that comes from the leaves and the flowers and the tiny fruits of the clementine. Petitgrain, for the most part, has mostly been known in perfumery and is only now starting to really become more well known in aromatherapy. I have personally described this as sweet. Do you notice? Would you agree? Sweet? Would you say it's green? Would you say it's tangy? And would you say it's floral? I think those are the four main notes that describe it. And more so than just the zest oils in a certain way, because of the presence of the leaves and the flowers. And I find that this blend of these aromas actually makes it uniquely euphoric and sensual. Now, the use of petitgrain therapeutically is also within the general framework of all the citrus oils, which is that it's uplifting, but it's also calming. And so we have, again, this kind of effect of balancing. When people are stressed, it's relaxing. When people are tired, it's uplifting. But this is also rejuvenative. And because of the presence of the flower, the neroli here, this now makes a crossover link therapeutically. This oil now can be linked to other flower oils that have a very positive effect on the female reproductive cycle. Menstrual cycle, glandular system, and that is so linked to sleep and stress and to liver function. So here, whenever we see flower oils that are beneficial for the female glandular system and the menstrual cycle, then what we see is a kind of biological unity between the functioning of the plants and the human body. And in this case, flowers are actually following biorhythms. The plants flower according to cycles of sun and moon. And so they convey that energy into the human body in different ways. And one of the ways that they do that is they help everybody, men and women, to get their sleep cycles back on track. And the flower oils have a very famous, long history of use, like, for example, lavender, very famous for helping relax and get good sleep. So we can see that there's a strong relationship between the flowering, the appearance, the blossoming of the plants, and biorhythms in nature, and helping to regulate biorhythms in the human body. And the female system, of course, is very tuned into the energetics of the flowers in that way. So women are very susceptible to flowers, therapeutically. Okay? And what we see in aromatherapy is that a lot of the oils that are very beneficial for regulating the menstrual cycle are flowers. It's an interesting biological unity that we can see. So I would say that because of the presence of the neroli, the blossom here itself, in this oil, that we can classify this particular type of petitgrain also with rejuvenation and with harmonizing of biorhythms for everyone, for sleep, for exhaustion, for tiredness, for tension, for that. But also it has a stronger link than the other citruses to the female system. So far, you have met the orange, zest. Okay, that was the first oil. This one is clementine, but it is petitgrain. And petitgrain is a term that means that they are distilling the leaves, the flower, and the small fruit. That's what this oil is. And that's from the clementine. But petitgrain is also distilled from orange, leaf, flower, fruit, and also from, it's the actual, normally what it refers to is just the leaves and the twigs of any type of citrus. So you have lime petitgrain, you have orange petitgrain, so forth, okay? This one is clementine petitgrain, but what is unique about this one is that it's actually traditionally distilled with the flower and the small fruits that they don't normally do anymore, okay? And no twigs. Let's do the clementine zest. And I think I've said enough about the therapeutics. For further reference, there's a lot of information on the product pages. Followed immediately by pamplemousse, grapefruit. What was your take? soft. Clementine zest is being described as being very soft. It is. You know, there's a nice way to sample these oils, and that is to open the lips a little bit when you inhale, so that you are breathing in, not just through the nostrils, but you're actually getting an airflow over your taste buds as well. And that actually enhances the perception of the oil. And another thing is breathe very slow, long inhalations with the mouth slightly open. And what that will do is it will start to show you many of the deeper notes that are inside that you wouldn't normally perceive. Try that. Okay, can you start to notice that there's many dimensions of fragrance that you wouldn't have noticed before? All right, so here is the grapefruit zest. Again, same extraction technique of chopping up the whole fruit with its juice and then centrifuging it and then distilling that. Again, very, very good for emotional tension. All the citruses. I would say that grapefruit is also among the citrus oils, I would say that grapefruit is probably more stimulant to the mind for alertness and awareness. Also, grapefruit is very antimicrobial in the diffuser with the respiratory oils again. All the citruses are. I think it's a bit more mentally uplifting, actually. I would say that the sweeter the fruit, the more joyful the general euphoric effect is, whereas this grapefruit, I would say, is a little bit more of a mental stimulant as opposed to like just a happy oil. All right, now we are getting into a new group. We are presenting these oils because they're unique, and they are unique medicinal oils. That's what we are calling them, unique medicinals. Now, I will give you as much information as I can, but these really, I'm finding difficulty actually coming across much information about their therapeutic use. One of the things that I found very interesting about aromatherapy in France at these distilleries will have a chart, a very simple chart of the oils. They'll have a little handout, and they have everything summed up in one sentence. And so, lavender, good for burns, good for sleep. That's it. And so that's how everybody knows lavender in France, okay? Two or three major functions. And so that's what I'm going to do here with this group of oils. I'm going to present the oil, we'll pass it around, and I'm going to give you one sentence about it. And I'll tell you the major use. And I got these because I think that they are, number one, quite intriguing. And one of the things that makes them intriguing is, number two, their potential. Now, over the years, I've brought in a lot of essential oils that nobody else has. We have unique species of this and unique species of that. And in order for people to know what to do with them, there has to be a lot of education because otherwise they're new. And in some cases, these oils have really taken off. Like, for example, Palo Santo is a relatively new oil on the market, but it really, really took off. And many of the unique species of frankincense that we have really become bestsellers, and people really like them a lot. Other things, people just don't know what to do with. We don't give it the proper education. The oil's a little too weird, whatever. It doesn't sell very well. Now, I'm going to present this first one with one piece of information. And I bought this oil simply because of this piece of information that came from the distiller. This oil is a bupleurum. Bupleurum. And bupleurum is well known in Chinese medicine for its aromatic roots that are made into a decoction that help relax the liver and therefore has a very good effect on the female glandular hormonal system for what is called liver qi stagnation, which means that you feel all tense before your period and you get headaches and you become irritable. And so this is not the same bupleurum species, but it's worth exploring. And one of, well, not one of, The only thing that I know about it, I will now tell you. And that is, apparently, it's very beneficial for helping nicotine withdrawal. That, I think, in itself justifies having a unique oil. Because we have had a lot of discussion in the foundations course, on the forums. People want to know, what's a really good oil for helping to stop smoking? And different people have different specific ideas. Some people have said, well, black pepper seems to be emerging as one that is very beneficial for reducing cravings and reducing the withdrawal symptoms and so forth. And so I will put this out here just with that limited amount of information, and I'll say, this oil comes from a plant that has a relative in Chinese medicine that's helpful for regulating the liver for relaxation, and I know nothing about this oil other than what this distiller told me. It's a very interesting oil, isn't it? It's quite strong. It's called Bupleurum. It's a Bupleurum oil. It is Bupleurum fruticosum. These are all pictures of Bupleurum, by the way. This is the flower. It's quite interesting. Unique, interesting oil. That's the flower. It looks like an alien. All right. This next one, speeding right along here, this is one of the reasons that we went to Sardinia, because we wanted to work with these people who were involved in the harvesting of the mastic gum. The mastic gum is a very, very beautiful resin that burns like frankincense. It's very, very fine and also has a lot of medicinal value. It comes from a variety of the pistachio tree. And so we discovered in Corsica that the tree was being distilled, and it's called lentisque. And so lentisque is Pistachium lentiscus. And it is the foliage. And it is a little bit expensive because it has a very low yield. And I will give you one simple thing about this oil to use. This one is also very, very good for lymphatic stagnation and blood circulation. It seems to be an oil that would mix very nicely with helichrysum for general enhancement of circulatory problems. For example, removing bruises, Raynaud syndrome. It's actually very true to just grinding up the leaves. It's very green foliage kind of smell. Now, because this has this lymphatic moving kind of quality, the simple word that we can use for lentisque oil is decongestant. Decongestant. Decongestant of the veins, decongestant of bruising, decongestant of fluids, decongestant of lymphatic. And also for that reason, I would suggest combining it with helichrysum and thinking about it in terms of regular gentle massage for varicose veins. Of course, with varicose veins, you have to be very, very careful. You don't want to use any kind of pressure, but very light application. Think in terms of fluid stagnation and lentisque. And now let's do the last oil here in this medicinal group. This one is the samphire. Samphire, you heard about this one? This one is really intriguing because this actually comes from an edible plant. It grows on the cliffs above the ocean. It's called Christe marine. Can you smell that it has a kind of seaweed note? Can you smell that it has a salty marine-like aroma? So there's the plant. It looks like this. It has been used in Europe as a salad vegetable for a very long time and also pickled. And so it gives this essential oil that has this kind of salty, spicy kind of fragrance. It has a lot of medicinal effects actually as a vegetable. It's kind of like one of those pot herbs. It's not something you would eat a lot of, but there are historically references to this being very good for the kidney system, being very decongesting and cleansing. And again, I'll just give you the very short version. And this was told to me by the distillers also. They said this is one of the best ones for cellulite. And so I mentioned that earlier with the dwarf juniper because that's how they like to combine it. They say that the combination of this samphire with the dwarf juniper in massage is very beneficial for reducing cellulite. Now, that would seem like a long-term project, and it is. We have a combination in aromatherapy that's fairly famous, which is cedar and grapefruit. And actually, I suggested, actually a student at Bastyr many years ago took that on as a project. And she said, I want to put that to the test and see if regular massage with cedar and grapefruit really does have a beneficial effect on cellulite. And after doing daily self-massage, abhyanga, with massage oil, scented with those two oils, she wrote back and she said it made a huge difference. Okay, so that's daily application, which will have a positive, beneficial, supportive effect on the underlying tissue fluid stagnation. So therefore, samphire and juniper you can think of, and you can also think of lentisque the same way, decongestant of fluid stagnation. I'm going to introduce another one of the medicinal oils in, and this is somewhat, this one is based entirely on my herbal experience. This is a unique co-distillation of copaiba oil with nettles tea. Now, we know that nettles have a very beneficial effect for skin problems, itching, rashes, hives, and especially when it's linked to underlying blood toxicity conditions. That's basically how we think of nettles in the herbal tradition. A blood purifier, it's also very high in minerals, good for strengthening the blood, but also it's relaxant to the nervous system at the allergic level. So for sinus allergies, skin irritation, what we call in Chinese medicine wind heat, toxins, itching and rashes, nettles is one of the first ones that we think of as a remedy. Now the way that this oil is prepared is that the nettles, strong nettle tea is mixed with the copaiba oil. And of course, the copaiba oil is a resin that's harvested from a tree in Amazonia. That is the tree right there. And this is the harvesting. It's very much like tapping rubber. And it produces an oleoresin, basically, that is widely used in Amazonian medicine throughout Central and South America for direct application to the skin, for fungus, for rashes, for irritation, for wound healing. It's also used internally in small doses for a lot of things that are beneficial for the stomach lining and the lungs. We're not going to talk about that side of it, but it is easily available in pharmacies in South America in capsules to be taken internally. So it's generally considered to be a healer of the skin and the mucous membranes. And so the nettle tea is boiled with the copaiba oil, and that is then distilled out. And so what you have is copaiba resin oil that is infused with the compounds of the nettle tea. It is a new creation by a chemist and distiller that we met on Corsica. And so I am presenting this as an option for direct application to the skin in all the ways that copaiba oil would be used for rashes, irritations, hives, burns, cuts, scratches, all these kinds of things. So this is copaiba co-distilled with nettles. And you'll actually be able to tell the fragrance contains both of them quite distinctly. Now there is one contraindication, and that is some people are actually very sensitive to the resin of copaiba. And so it's paradoxical because on the one hand, generally it's used very safely by many, many people for treating skin conditions and irritation. But in a few cases, especially if you use too much for too long, it can actually cause skin irritation. And so the simple answer to that is just discontinue it. Just stop using it. That's the obvious answer. The copaiba oil is coming from a source in Honduras, and he's importing it to Corsica, and then he is distilling it with the nettles tea. let's go quickly into the next one. Oh, I wanted to tell you here, we met what I consider to be the world's finest lavender oil. And this is the wild high altitude Lavandula augustifolia, the true wild lavender from the mountains of France. Very little is produced. The producer, the distiller, works with a team of harvesters. He has a lease for 8,000 acres of mountains. Every year they get 10 liters of oil from 8,000 acres hand harvested. So we were very fortunate. We have 2 liters on the way, and we're very pleased actually to offer this because it's not very common. There's a lot of oil sold as wild lavender, high altitude wild lavender, which are not. Now we also have 2 new lavender oils coming. We will be rolling all 3 of these out, hopefully at the same time, where you'll be able to get high altitude wild lavender and the new lavender Mayette variety and the new lavender fine population variety. Okay, now I did want to spend a minute on hyssop, and then we are almost to the helichrysum and the grand finale. Now hyssop was an oil that we had a lot of requests for, and this was an oil that I have not had a lot of contact with. As a plant, it looks very similar actually to rosemary. I would classify this one as a respiratory oil. There are 2 distinct chemotypes, or probably more, and there have been some concerns. There are concerns in aromatherapy circles about one of the types, the chemotypes, as having some toxicity. This one is not it. This particular hyssop is very high in eucalyptol mostly. How do you like it? It's very nice, isn't it? And so may I suggest we think of this as being very supportive to the respiratory system in a similar way as the respiratory oils, so you can mix it with the pines and the conifers and the junipers. But also we can think about this as maybe having some qualities like rosemary as well, and it strengthens the lungs. It actually, strengthens it. It seems to be more of a warming stimulant for the lungs. That's my general impression about it. Combines easily with eucalyptus, combines easily with rosemary. And so, therefore, we think about hyssop to add for benefiting the lungs. It is, this particular type that we have is generally considered to be relatively non-toxic. Used in a diffuser, it's probably just fine. I wouldn't have any concerns about it. Next oil, I'm just going to skip over, but I wanted to show you the pictures, and that is myrtle. And myrtle is very, very medicinal. The way that I would sum up my knowledge of myrtle at this point is very similar to tea tree. The use of it is very, very effective for direct palm inhalation and steam and diffuser and so forth, specifically for infection of the sinuses. It actually smells similar to some types of tea tree as well. Very astringent, very medicinal note, somewhat unpleasant. Okay, so we also have a type of rosemary, a new rosemary, Corsican rosemary that we're bringing out. Lots of information easily available about the therapeutics. And we also have a new wild carrot seed oil that is coming out. And we will continue with the carrot seed oil that we currently have in stock because it is less expensive. This oil is much more expensive, and it is also quite extraordinary in terms of its fragrance and its therapeutic benefit. I'll go ahead and pass that around because we are now at the end of the main oil groups, and this is wild harvested. This is wild harvested from Corsica, and the main difference is that it's from Corsica. Not that there's no other difference otherwise. It's just that where it's from, as we've noticed with all of these oils, the Corsican oils just have a kind of vitality that's extraordinary. So, carrot seed oil we think of as primarily a skin healing oil. Very, very good for all kinds of skin purposes. For that, we would also think about linking it very much with helichrysum. You like it? Let's just say that we have, in this oil, we have 2 very distinct tiers of quality and price.
Those with finer
Exactly. For those with finer palates and bigger wallets, this one is quite interesting that way, and everybody is responding as if now you're really meeting the real thing. Okay, but that is my impression about all these Corsican oils. For the most part, they are more expensive, and for the most part, they are way higher quality. So therefore, we now have reached the highest level of some of these oils that you can possibly go in the world. For example, the high altitude wild Lavandula gustifolia. There isn't anything better than that. That's as good as it gets when it comes to lavender. This is as good as it gets when it comes to carrot seed. And now, let's talk about the best helichrysum oil in the world. Okay, so we went to Corsica specifically to look for the helichrysum oil. And I had a particular interest in this oil because I was very impressed with its therapeutic functions. I will touch on those therapeutic functions here very briefly, and then we'll unpack it in a little bit more detail once the oils go around, because I also learned a lot of new therapeutic functions on this trip. I have known that helichrysum is very, very important for wound healing, for blood vitalizing, skin regeneration, scar tissue resolving, and so forth. That is the main information that I have known about it. And for those of you who were present at our second certification program up on the ridge at Shady Creek, a very interesting thing happened. And this is when I first really sat up and took notice of helichrysum. I had known, oh yeah, it's a good oil for skin and circulation, anti-inflammatory, good for pain, good for swelling and bruising, soft tissue injuries, all of that. I had known that. Well, during that retreat, that 5 days, we studied a lot of oils in depth, and with each oil, we had a little testimonial time where we had the microphone in the center of the room, and people would come up and they would talk about experiences that they had had. And so we had frankincense, and 5 or 6 people came up and talked about the wound healing powers and the spiritual powers. We had this and we had that. I don't remember the other oils. And small groups of people would come up, and then we got to helichrysum, and the line went all the way around the room. And I was very, very impressed. There were dozens and dozens of people who had helichrysum testimonials, and I had never really grasped or appreciated the significance of this oil therapeutically. And some of these things were very simple. People say, oh yeah, I like to use your flower of the sun, it's mixed with rosehip seed, and it's really nice on the skin. It's really helped protect my skin from the sun, and simple things like that. And then we have other people that are getting up and they're saying, my grandfather got out of surgery, a major operation for neck cancer, and the wound wasn't healing. It was getting all infected. The doctors didn't know what to do. We started applying it directly. Miraculous. The doctors all wanted to know what it was. Those kind of stories really grabbed my attention. This is serious, serious healing oil. And so because of that, I now rank helichrysum oil to be the #1 healing oil that I know about. Lavender, of course, #1 selling oil. Good for sleep, good for this, good for that, wide range of therapeutic benefits. But helichrysum performs over and over and over in a very dramatic way for all of these things that have to do with skin, underlying tissues, blood vessels, injuries, soft tissue injuries especially. It seems to stop the whole body's process of overreacting at the cellular tissue level. It cuts down the inflammation, it stops the pain, it speeds up the healing. Just a simple testimonial from our house last week. Sarah banged her face very, very hard, and she was absolutely sure that she was going to have a nasty bruise all over. She hit it so hard. And, for many hours afterwards, strong smell of helichrysum is blessing our home. And the next day she says, in her testimonials, this is absolutely amazing. There's no sign of the impact. Okay, so that kind of use is what we think of helichrysum for. Now I'm going to tell you about meeting the distiller. Now this is the helichrysum. This is where it grows, actually, on the rocky cliffs There it is in the first opening stage. This is what it looks like in the bud stage before the flowers actually open. We got there right in this stage, and then we stayed until it went to that stage. That's the flowering stage. Now the fragrance of the flowers is very, very dramatic. And so here we have the full flowering helichrysum. Now, the story that I want to tell you about finding the best helichrysum has to do actually with a little bit of information about the plant itself on the island. Up until 7 years ago, all the helichrysum oil on Corsica was wild harvested. And there were very limited supplies available because this plant has a very, very low yield. You have to harvest huge amounts of it to get a very small amount of oil. And because it was not being cultivated, it was all wild. And so what that means is that these distillers get these contracts with the Corsican government to harvest certain tracts of land every year, and they take good care of it. So it's a sustainable, wild harvested crop. Now, what they have to do is they have to climb around on those cliffs, and they have to go up into the high mountains, and there's no roads up there. They basically have to cut this stuff by hand and carry it down on their backs. And they get very little oil. And so that is why the Corsican oil was almost impossible to get. And Sarah can tell you that when she first started going through and we were looking at, the distillers, a lot of these distillers never responded. We just decided, hey, we're just going to have to go and meet these people, okay? But, some distillers responded, and one guy in particular, we had a very interesting exchange. We got the impression that there was like this Corsican mafia of helichrysum. It was like, well, we don't have very much, and we kind of save it for the family kind of thing, And as it turns out, that's actually kind of true. And so we went and we did some research, and what we found is that now, in the last 7 years, they are cultivating a lot of helichrysum. But like the lavender that is cultivated, it's very, very different than the wild. Now, the helichrysum that we have had is very good. It comes from Hungary, it comes from the Balkan area, it comes from Croatia. This is a very good quality oil, and people still give great testimonials. But there's something about the soil specifically in Corsica that really affects the chemistry. Now, there are two chemotypes to the helichrysum, and this is important to understand the therapeutics. The first is what the cosmetic industry is looking for, and this is neryl acetate. And the neryl acetate is the one that really gives the helichrysum its therapeutic value for the skin. The second one, a family of compounds that are found more in the wild type. And these are called itallidiones. Itallidiones. Now, the itallidiones, as I was instructed by the distillers, is what gives you the spiritual effect of the oil. So now I'm going to introduce you to the distiller of the finest helichrysum oil in the world. And what he is doing is he is up in the mountains harvesting the helichrysum that is now in the mail, 1 liter, wild harvested, high altitude helichrysum. Now, they also cultivate the helichrysum, and the cultivated is also a very, very fine oil. We discovered that the helichrysum really likes the dry climate. So this is Jean-Michel, and he is the distiller. He used to be an accountant. What you can't see here is that he has distinct, unmistakable elfin ears, huge pointed ears. And he didn't like being an accountant, and so he went to his friend Luke, who is an accountant. He said, do you know any other work I can do? And Luke said, well, my wife is buying a farm in Corsica and wants to start this distillery. Why don't you talk to her? And so he does the distillation for Michel. So Jean-Michel works with Michel, the owner, and Michel is married to Luc, the husband, who's the accountant. So now you know the whole story. But here's the thing that was really intriguing about the therapeutics of this oil at a completely different level. You know the basic stuff about all the wound healing. Well, there's more to the wound healing. Now, Michel is the first distiller that I have met who immediately talked about contemplative aromatherapy. So we go out to this distillery way out in the middle of nowhere. You have to walk to it, actually. And he says, in this very heavy French accent, I like to spend a lot of time smelling these oils. And so I spent 45 minutes one time breathing helichrysum. Okay. And then he says, I had an out-of-body experience. So the way that he described this very simply, the healing effect of the high-altitude wild lavender. Keep in mind that the itolidiones are described as being healing to the mind, healing to the emotions, whereas the narrow acetate is healing to the body, to the skin, to the blood circulation, to injuries. Anybody who smells an oil for 45 minutes continuously and then describes their experience, I'm going to listen to him. So what he said in this broken English was, when we're kids, painful things happen, and we put them in a bag, and we keep the bag inside of us. And then, as we go through our adult life, things bother us, and those things get stirred up inside that bag. You know what he's talking about, right? Emotional memories. Well, emotional memories are directly linked to the limbic system. The limbic system actually has to control, it has to use energy all the time to suppress painful emotional memories that get stirred up. So he says, if you breathe this helichrysum oil from the high altitude mountains, what it does is it goes in and it starts to relax that bag. It opens that bag of painful memories, and it just starts to go in and heal it. And then when you go to sleep that night, you sleep really nicely, and you have these very interesting dreams where your mind metabolizes your past. Okay? So I thought that was a beautiful poetic description of how emotional wound healing is benefited and healed through aromatherapy. And aromatherapy, of course, is the direct link to the limbic system, which is the direct center, which controls all of that. It reminds me in a lot of ways of Jatamansi oil. Okay, the spikenard oil gives very good deep sleep with very interesting dreams that seems to really release a lot of stored, deep-seated emotional memories. So with that in mind, of course, the first thing that I asked was, can I get some? And Luke, the accountant, was there, and he said no. And he said, this year we are only producing 2 liters, and the whole team is going to have to be in the mountains for a week to get the 2 liters. And I said, what do you need for 1 liter? And so we negotiated a price, and the whole team spent several extra days up in the mountains doing this for us. And so we got 1 liter, which, because it is not cultivated, because the concentration of the oil gets higher, the higher the altitude goes, and because this is on the south side of the island, which is a dry side of the island, not only is this the best helichrysum, which is renowned to come from Corsica in general, but it is also coming from the best part of Corsica, the best side of the island, from the high altitude, wild harvested, not the cultivated type, by a family that has a deeply spiritual relationship to the plant. And for that reason, I say, it doesn't get any better than this. Okay, so check it out.
What is the altitude?
1,200 meters, which is about, what is that? That's about 4,000 feet. It's intensely sweet. Isn't it lovely? Now, this can be used for all of the skin healing, wound healing, blood vitalizing, bruise resolving, scar tissue resolving purposes, as all the other helichrysums. But I would also like to impress upon you that this family, who has this unique relationship with this plant, says it is a wild horse spirit. Yeah. That affects people's dreams. It seems to have, in that sense, A similar characteristic with Palo Santo, with agar wood, with other oils that we would consider wish-fulfilling gems. That's also one of the things that Jean-Michel said at the end of his little discussion about his contemplative aromatherapy experience. He said that because this heals the pain inside, it allows us to have positive things come into our life. So in that sense, I've heard that from also Dante Bolcato, who swears that the Palo Santo makes space in people's minds, in the body, in the home, in society, for good blessings to come in. That's what the agar wood is famous for doing, is attracting good fortune. And so therefore, I would put this not only at the top of the list of the therapeutic oils for the home, but also in the category of spiritual, wish-fulfilling gem oils that bring some kind of magical blessings with them. How do you like it? It's like honey. It is very much like honey, yeah. Okay. So we are going to have we're going to have 4 products that are going to be in the Helichrysum package. They may not all be there at once, because some of them actually deserve to be featured by themselves as well. So we will have 2 Helichrysums. We will have this high-altitude wild Helichrysum. We will have also the cultivated type from their farm, and that's high in narrow acetate. And we will also have Helichrysum hydrosol, and the hydrosol is excellent for spraying on the skin, very, very nice for toning and for anti-inflammatory, anti-aging, just nice for skin freshening, very, very nice hydrosol. And then finally, we're going to have a product which they make. And they make this using a base of almond oil, and in that almond oil they put some essential oils like cistus, which is good for the skin. And then they also put in the cultivated and the wild Helichrysum oils in that, and then they soak the fresh Helichrysum flowers in that oil exposed to the sun. So it's a sun infusion of fresh Corsican Helichrysum flowers. Now, we have a lot of different skincare products that Floracopeia has launched over the last year. There are different groups of people who like different things. I would say that everything that we have had has been very high quality, but I will say personally for me, I am really picky. I'm not a big skincare product person. And there's only one thing that has really grabbed my attention, and that was this product. It's a serum. It's a serum. And it came in a little squirt bottle, and Sarah says, we have to get this. And I think we made the mistake of only getting one. And for the entire remainder of our journey, I was hogging that little bottle of serum. She had to keep asking me, where did it go? That was the only thing that I have ever actually wanted to put on my face on a regular basis. Everything else, okay, that's cool. That's all kind of nice. I like, misting with hydrosols occasionally. I like the flower of the sun. I like that kind of stuff. But this is the only thing that actually grabbed my attention and said, wow, I'd really like to do this, like on an ongoing basis. Now, the Rotum oil is a close second in terms of my personal favorites, but this one, I would say, is even more superior to that. And so we made arrangements. Sarah said, we must have this. Even if the company doesn't carry it, we must have. We must have gallons of it at home. And so we have 2 liters on order that are coming. No, actually the 2 liters are on the way to the bottling company. How much of it we release is a different matter. Thank you for your patience and your kind attention throughout this entire thing. I know we went a little bit long with some of this stuff. I hope you didn't object. Now, there will be a lot of educational material available about all of these oils. For those, especially now listening in on the webcast, all of these oils will be on the product pages. There will be a lot of information on the product pages. And in the case of the Helichrysum, there's also an article that's up on the Floracopeia site about helichrysum in detail, a lot of information about that for further study. We feel really good about the helichrysum and the regenerescence and the high altitude wild lavender. We feel really good about all these oils. Now the cistus oil was the first thing, just an offering. The tree oils, basically just getting the group started. Citrus oils, quite unique. As you could tell, we started to really get more energy going when the citruses came out. The medicinal oils are unique and they're somewhat mysterious, but they have a lot of potential for incredible therapeutic benefit. I'm presenting these for further research and study for the aromatherapy world to check out and see, is there really something beneficial here? I believe there is. I believe that these are very important oils that nobody knows about yet that we should explore. And then finally, the helichrysums we feel are really going to be very, very important for everybody. And the serum especially, I think, is going to be very, very popular. And it's so nice to see how Halo is developing, because we are broadcasting, for those of you who may have checked out this webcast late, we're broadcasting live here from Halo, Health Alternative for All Locals in Nevada City on a beautiful summer night. And so we're here surrounded by all of these herbs hanging from the ceiling in the apothecary, full of herbs, and very nice to give this kind of information. This is also a local center for education now through the work of Shay Smith, who had a vision, came to the Farm to Pharmacy program not so long ago and had a vision. One of those Floracopeia testimonials, I went to bed and I woke up and I was a different person. And I had a whole new life. So thank you for creating that whole new life for all of us, actually. Okay, all right.